Okay, gents, here we go. Welcome to part 5 of my Fight Club movie analysis. We begin, as always, with a short recap of the ground already covered. Our nameless protagonist, referred to as the narrator, lives a colorless life as a corporate drone. And in this stale and stodgy existence, his personality fragments and animates an alter ego, Tyler Durden, who emerges as the narrator's polar opposite, edgy, outspoken, confident, and solidly autonomous. Tyler instigates a fight with the narrator to provoke him out of his mind-numbing, directionless rut. It has the desired effect, and the narrator experiences a kind of rebirth. He hardens and begins to take more command of his life. He also begins to dissect the narratives around him that he was once enslaved to. It's still not enough, however, to rattle him from his sexual insecurities. He remains locked in a cage of true forced loneliness, still unable to admit to or act on his sexual and emotional longings, even as his alter ego Tyler goes on a rampage of sport-fucking the object of his repressed desires. Meanwhile, the fighting has attracted a growing number of other men who are living similarly mundane and pointless lives. Like the narrator, these men are invigorated by the personal combat. They form a fledgling society called Fight Club. At this point in the series, I've covered the first hour of the movie's 2-hour, 31-minute runtime. So there's an abundance remaining as we enter one of the movie's more iconic moments, making soap. Tyler's trade is producing high-end women's soaps and wholesaling the line to exclusive stores. The production of soap was set up with a hysterically funny scene with Tyler and the narrator stealing bio-waste bags full of human fat from a liposuction clinic. The punchline to that scenario was delivered in the next scene by the narrator as a sales clerk was taking delivery of the soap. "It was beautiful," he said. "We were selling rich women their own fat asses back to them." Woven into this comedic delivery, however, was a much more serious subplot, that of Tyler's ongoing efforts to push the narrator, sometimes viciously, toward taking ownership and control of his life. The vehicle for this is a short, complicated scene in which Tyler burns the narrator's hand by planting a wet kiss on it and then covering it with lye. To take the closer look at the possible meaning of all this, I will take this one on, one line at a time. As the lye burns into his skin, the narrator recoils from the pain. Tyler, holding on to the narrator's hand, informs him, "It will hurt more than you've ever been burned, and it will leave a scar." Panicked by the intensity of the pain, the narrator harkens back to his guided imagery exercises for pain management from one of the cancer support groups. Tyler, of course, being the narrator, knows what he's trying to do. "Stay with the pain," Tyler commands. "Don't shut this out." The narrator tries to pull away, but Tyler pulls him back in. "Look at your hand," he barks, and then continues with the lesson he's trying to impart. "The first soap was made from the ashes of heroes," he says, "like the first monkey shot into space. Without pain, without sacrifice, we would have nothing." The narrator tries to escape again, looking for refuge in his imagined cave. "Stop it," Tyler barks at him. "This is your pain. This is your burning hand. It's right here." At this point, the narrator is visibly starting to buckle from the intensity of the pain. He begins chanting desperately about going into his cave. "No," Tyler yells, "don't deal with it the way those dead people do. Come on. What you're feeling is premature enlightenment." For a moment, the narrator wins the battle of wills. He succeeds in retreating into his cave and for a moment finds himself leaning over the splayed-out Marla, about to kiss her. Tyler interrupts the vision by slapping the narrator in the face. "This is the greatest moment of your life," he says, "and you're off somewhere, missing it." The narrator tries to speak, but Tyler bowls over him. "Shut up," he says. "Our fathers were our models for God. And if our fathers bailed, what does that tell us about God?" The narrator pleads that he doesn't know, and Tyler slaps him again. "Listen to me. You have to consider the possibility that God doesn't like you. He never wanted you. In all probability, he hates you. This is not the worst thing that can happen." "It isn't?" asked the narrator, as though unable to comprehend anything worse than the present. "We don't need him," says Tyler. "Fuck damnation. Fuck redemption. We are God's unwanted children, and so be it." There's a little more to this scene that follows, but this is where I wanted to stop for some thoughts on this very large plateful of dialogue. And before we get started, if you're a big fan of Tyler Durden as a red pill pioneer and guru, you're not going to like some of what I have to say. Indeed, I advised one such commenter on the last talk that based on his comment, he would definitely hate this one and the next one. I should have said he would really hate the rest of them, because that is where we're going. Now, that said, I think this is the most personally revealing scene about Tyler in the film, and what is revealed is not near all bad. It's also a place where I want to invoke one of my earlier disclaimers. There's the message that the movie makers think they are giving you, and there's the message that they actually gave you. For me, that often boils down to a valiant attempt at a red pill message, but one where the blue shines through in a bold hue. From the red pill perspective, the clear subtext of this scene is that in order for the narrator to master his life, he must confront his emotional pain. Not just confront, but confront fearlessly, with the intent to conquer. He must face the pain of his sexual and social isolation, the pain of his father's rejection, the pain of his life as a white-collar slave, indeed the pain of all the injustices in his life, every last cut and scrape, all the things that led the narrator to chronic anxiety and insomnia, the reasons he became an emotional parasite in the realm of dying, feminized men. He must become fully aware of this pain. He must face it and take it. He must master it, first by abandoning all effort and desire to escape it. And that is the red pill lesson. Red pill men, in my experience, are well versed in facing uncomfortable, painful realities about life, things that most men put a great deal of energy into avoiding even thinking about. Things that most men are afraid to look at. And by mastering the pain that comes with stripping away the illusion created by 1,000 pretty lies, they do in fact gain a newfound mastery in their lives. But again, that is the closer red pill look. It is the lesson that I wish Tyler was teaching. Alas, it's not. This is where Tyler shows his hand and proves that he is going off the rails. Let's consider his statement from the exchange I just went over. "The first soap was made from the ashes of heroes," he told the narrator as his hand was burning. The real meaning of this was revealed shortly before he poured lye on the hand of the narrator, when he explained to him the origin of soap. Ancient peoples found that their clothes got cleaner if they washed them in a certain spot on the river, he said. Why? Because human sacrifices were once made on the hills over the river. Year after year, bodies burnt. Rain fell. Water seeped through the wood ashes to become lye. The lye combined with the melted fat of the bodies till a thick, white soapy discharge crept into the river. And thus Tyler explains to us what he meant when he said that the first soap was made from the ashes of heroes. To Tyler, the heroes were the victims of human sacrifice. His heroes are sacrificial lambs. Now we'll see this theme enacted quite convincingly again later in the film, but suffice it to say for now that what Tyler values in the narrator and in the other men in Fight Club can be summed up succinctly in vernacular from the script. I am Jack's disposable men. Like the first monkey shot into space, without pain, without sacrifice, says Tyler, we would have nothing. Now make no mistake about it, this was certainly the formula for human success. Human success, of course, being a decidedly masculine endeavor. However, we also know that this formula in the modern context gets applied blindly, which is why we look around today and see so much sacrifice without progress or purpose. That legacy and the wisdom born from it is carved deeply into Red Pill philosophy as a cautionary tale. For Red Pill men, it is no longer our lot to be monkeys shot into space, taking the deadly risk for the sake of those whose lives are more valued. We are no longer destined for that sacrificial role, bodies burned and leached through the ashes from which society can wash its clothes. Again, Tyler goes on to reinforce this decidedly, patently blue pill notion of our place in the world. You have to consider the possibility that God doesn't like you, he says. He never wanted you. In all probability, he hates you. But let's be frank here. This isn't Tyler's possibility or probability. It is his certainty. And of course, he is only framing this in terms of God on the heels of his declaration that God and our fathers are one and the same. Remember what he said? Our fathers were our models for God, and if our fathers bailed, what does that tell us about God? This actually tells us more about Tyler than it does God or our fathers. I am Jack's fatherless society. And as we move on to the next segment of this series on Fight Club, we will see what that society looks like from the bird's eye view. But first I want to close with another thought on the relationship between the narrator and Tyler. I talked earlier about the concept of the shadow as proffered by Carl Jung. Jung brought us another duality that is held up over time in terms of its utility. That idea was that in the unconscious mind of a man, there was a feminine archetype, or anima, operating. I have seen where some have speculated that Marla fit the model for this, that she was the narrator's anima. But I ask you to look at this image of the scar on the narrator's hand from where Tyler poured the lie. One might look at that and conclude that Tyler, the proponent for the narrator's disposability, for his being unwanted and useless save for his willingness to sacrifice, that he is the narrator's anima, not Marla. The mark of a woman. It makes perfect sense to me. Now, as I said earlier, up to the point that I started this segment, I had covered the first hour of this movie. Now I've covered the first hour in 3 minutes, reminding me that I still don't have a grip on exactly how many talks this will take. Doesn't matter though, doing this is fun for me, as I hope it is for you. As always, I hope you've enjoyed, even if you haven't, and we'll see you next time.